Today's question is, employers and managers who had to fire someone on their first day. What happened?
He tried to buy weed off a customer just because the customer looked like someone who might have weed. He didn't. I got to fire my co-manager's sister who called 5 minutes before her first shift and said she'd be there in an hour because she just sat down to dinner with friends. What do you mean you just sat down for dinner? Your first shift is in 5 minutes? Yeah, I know. But we were out and decided to go for dinner. I'll still be there, just a little late. An hour isn't a little late. Be here in 5 minutes or don't bother coming in at all. But co-manager is my sister. She gave me the job. Yes, she did. See you in 5 or not at all. But co-manager is my sister. I worked at a popular teen/college kid clothing store. I wasn't the manager, but I trained new hires. This one girl shopped at the store a lot, and we were excited to hire her. She was let go because she was late, was caught trying on clothes instead of greeting, and apparently laughed when anyone asked for a size larger than a medium. Her family showed up at the end of her shift and tried to buy $2,000 to $3,000 worth of clothes with her employee discount. Corporate policy sucks, so they got a good portion of it. Her mom tried to bring it all back years later, completely worn/destroyed, and threw a fit saying she should get full price because the girl had died. Guess who we could all see sitting in her mom's car? I'm a teacher. I was on a committee to hire a new 5th grade teacher. I was showing her the ropes and monitoring her in class behavior. I watched this bonehead tell a student, "I don't like you very much. Figure it out yourself." The next thing I showed her was the door. In the exit interview, had on the walk to the door. I demanded an explanation, and she said of the student she didn't like, she said, "He was wearing designer jeans. You know his life is all peaches and cream, taking from us little guys." I say, "Did he make an inappropriate comment to you about money?" She says, "No, but I know they're kind." TLDR, 30-year-old woman was classist against a 10-year-old. My chef hired a guy who was less than a week out of prison for dealing. He was just going to wash dishes. Seemed like an okay guy, just looking for some work because he had just done 5+ years. So, day 1, he goes to head chef and asks, "Hey man, you know anybody here who wants to buy heroin?" Out the door 2 hours into his first job out of the joint. IT position, supposedly had a BA in computer science with 2 years experience in relevant technical position. I didn't interview him. We very quickly discovered that his computer abilities were non-existent, started asking questions until he broke down and said he lied on his resume because he wanted to make more money. His previous job was drywall installation. We gave him a list of software he needed, available via a URL. He didn't know what to do with a URL or what a URL was, and then it quickly unraveled. It was about 3 hours because the first 2 were paperwork. The job hours were from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. Our new hire showed up about 10 minutes late on the first day. Normally 10 minutes late isn't that big a deal to me, but it was his first day, and I had pulled 3 other staff members into our 8 a.m. meeting so we could discuss the training schedule with our new hire. So we are already in our meeting when the new guy walks in. He doesn't apologize for being late. He just sits down as I'm going over the training schedule for the week. After a few minutes of listening to us discuss what he's going to be doing for the rest of this week, he raises his hand and says, "Can we reschedule the afternoon sessions planned for today and tomorrow? I have to leave at 11 today and 12:30 tomorrow." This was the first time I was hearing about these plans. I asked the 3 staff supervisors to give me an opportunity to speak with the new guy alone for a few minutes. They leave the room, so I start talking to the guy about how he can't just change his schedule without running it by management first. As I'm talking to this guy, he gets a text. He looks down at his phone and puts his hand up, as if he were telling me, "I'll be with you right after I finish reading this text." As soon as he finished reading the text and looked back at me, I said, "This isn't going to work. Please make sure you take everything you brought with you and do not return." I'll have HR email you your separation papers." He seemed pretty shocked and asked what he did wrong, so I told him. He tried to explain himself, but I told him that it's best if he finds somewhere else to work. I work for a company that takes care of the HR needs of other small companies in my area. New hires often come in to fill out paperwork. We had this guy who came in, filled out his name and social security number, gave it to us, then proceeded to steal the front desk guy's wallet and keys, right in front of the very visible security camera. Turns out the police knew the guy as we was a repeat offender. He lived right around the corner. The most memorable firing I witnessed was this man who got hired as VP of Marketing. He thought the title gave him the right to be late on his first day for an important meeting with our board members, VP and CEO. Though irritating, he was given a pass since he was new and rewarded with a second chance to impress. This proved to be useless as he was later heard propositioning our new interns for sex in exchange to be in this imaginary marketing campaign that supposedly would come with endless perks and cash. The CEO personally escorted him out and kindly told him to go fuck himself. In the most PC way, of course. Edit. I have a bunch of PM calling me a liar. I'm so sorry. I forgot this was Reddit. I intentionally forgot to add that before he left. We all took part of a wild workplace orgy where the CEO was the bottomed and I wore a strapped-on. There was a circle jerk too. The Circus du Soleil even came and finished us off with their magic and flexed bodies. When the VPOFM left, we all cried tears of sorrow as he walked out to his Jaguar to the beat of Eye of the Tiger. Life resumed that day, but it was never the same, you know? Sobson corner. But seriously, it was a lot more boring than I made it to be. He made inappropriate offer. CEO led him downstairs with security. They walked to the side door where VPOFM was told to never come back. Go fornicate with thyself, and he walked out. Sometimes, gasped the CEO, do more than sit at his desk and drink whiskey as a parade of hungry assistants come over and offer to suck him off. Sometimes they do OMG paperwork. I manage a coffee shop lunchy place. Young girl came in fresh out of culinary school and had previous coffee shop experience. What could go wrong, right? The first day I had her shadow the other employees just to get a hang of the POS system and general flow of the store. Nope, customers overwhelmed her and she liked to hide in the back leaning on the ice machine. Fine. Whatever. She said she loved baking earlier on, so I sent her to the kitchen to make some cookies. I'm super chill. I didn't even care what kind. As long as they were fucking awesome and delicious, she had creative control. She comes out sometime later admitting she doesn't know how to make cookies and needs help. Now I'm getting bloody frustrated. As we move on into lunch, rush a wave of customers, flood the front of house, and I was needed. I had 40 liters of soup in the back needing a titch more roux, and asked her to thicken it a tad before serving. Surely she could handle that, soups and sauces being addressed in the first bloody week of the culinary school she apparently attended. I attended the same program, by the way. No. She found a box of cornstarch and dumped the whole box in. Dry. Soup destroyed. Her shift ended shortly afterwards. Turns out I forgot to get her contact information at the beginning of the shift, so I had to message her on Facebook, telling her not to bother ever returning. Classy, I know, but she was just one huge bloody mess I couldn't even begin to fix. I worked as a manager in an upscale seafood restaurant a few years ago. We had recently hired a few more wait staff to cope with the customer demand as summer was starting. Excited to train up new staff for the first time ever, 3 of them turned up on time and got started with their buddy staff. Guy number 4 turned up over an hour late, stunk of alcohol and BO, and had dark yellow pit stains on his apparently new white uniform shirt. I fired him within 10 minutes. He then proceeded to knock over chairs and pull tablecloths off tables, so security was called. First person I ever fired. I felt bad and then went out for a smoke before getting back into work. Another reason why I left the hospitality industry. Staff turnover too high, too easy to burn out. I'm a delivery driver. I'm also the head training guy at my store, mostly because I'm pretty good at it. I've always said that when hiring a delivery driver, there's a trifecta of qualities that we want a driver to have: the ability to show up on time, having a clean driving record and their own car, and not being a gigantic piece of shit. People that fit all three usually stick around and make good money. But a lot of new hires only have two of those qualities, and since you have to have a car, that narrows down what they don't have. Had a guy show up to work his first day. Immediately starts talking about how he likes to smoke weed, do drugs in his free time. I mean, it's a pizza place, so whatever, but maybe not on your first day. Couple hours later, he says that one of his friends is going to drop off his cell charger. Guy's friend gets there, they talk briefly, and the guy comes back in the store. Could not produce the cell phone charger. He did, however, have way more cash than he could have made in the 2 hours he worked. Fired on the spot. At least 30 people just didn't show up after their first day. Some of them made a bunch of money their first day and seemed really excited to keep working and then just ghosted. At my store, drivers are expected to do stuff in between runs, like answer phones, fold boxes, make pizzas, wash dishes, etc. One new hire informed us that he was hired to drive, and that was it. My GM told him gently that while other places might work that way, we don't. He insisted that he wasn't going to do anything else but drive, and proceeded to go sit in the lobby and play on his phone. My GM, being the wonderful guy that he is, clocked the dude out and just didn't say anything. The guy was in the lobby for like 3 hours before he realized that anything was up. Suddenly turned apologetic, but he was fired anyway. Had a girl get hired. This girl was from a very rich neighborhood. She worked for a day or two and seemed to be handling things pretty well, until she had to take a delivery to a shitty area after dark. The girl didn't really have a problem with this, but her mom did. Her mom basically came in the store and informed my boss that this girl would only be taking deliveries to the rich neighborhood she lived in from now on. My GM said that wasn't happening, so the mom went off on him. I felt really bad for her because she was clearly embarrassed. Her mom made her quit that night. This guy was never hired, but I like to tell it anyway. Guy comes in smack in the middle of our Friday night rush and asks for an application. We give it to him, and he leaves. Comes back an hour later and asks to see our manager. My GM tells him that now is not a good time. So the guy leaves and comes back with his mother. His mother demands to see our GM. His mother is demanding we hire him. She also mentions that he's never had a job. Also mentions that she filled out his application perfectly. Keep in mind that while she is doing this, there is a line of people waiting to get their pizza, and our phones are ringing off the hook. So my GM promises to call him back later just to get her out of the store. He called them back at 1:30 a.m. to say that he was no longer considering her application. New guy got hungry and decided to keep the customer's pepperoni pizza for himself and tell the customer that we were out of pepperoni. The understandably irate customer refused the whole order and called us. Fired when he got back. One guy went out on his first solo delivery and then went to his house to take a nap, despite me explaining his responsibilities between deliveries. He thought drivers just went home and we called them when there was a delivery. This was bad enough, but he had gone to a rough area after dark. So when he was gone for like an hour and wouldn't pick up his phone, we assumed the worst and called the cops. They weren't very happy either. Older guy worked with us for like a week. He came up for a school delivery. Told us he couldn't take it. When asked why, "Well, I'm not allowed within 1,000 feet of children or places where they congregate." One guy got caught adding $1 or $2 to every credit card tip at the end of the night. We found out the next day when we got a bunch of irate calls. Driver got stiffed by a customer. Proceeded to piss on the customer's doorknob. Customer had a door camera, which I had mentioned when I took him to that guy's house earlier that week on a training run. Had a phone girl start working with us. She was in high school and was actually a good employee for the first 2 days. Third day, she calls up about 3 hours before her shift and says she has a family emergency and can't come in. My GM was cool with it and asked her when she could be back. She said she would know more later that day. An hour or two past her start time, 2 cops arrived with a warrant for her arrest. Apparently, she beat the absolute shit out of another girl and fled the state. Guy got a customer's number and started sending her flirty texts. When we fired him, he told us he thought he would get laid a lot at this job. An 18-year-old got an open container citation while working. He probably would have gotten away with it if he didn't immediately brag about it when he got back to the store. A guy went an hour out of our city to deliver a pizza because his GPS told him to. He didn't get fired for that. He got fired for threatening to beat a shift leader's ass for setting a drink on his car. Also for confirming that he said that when another manager went to go talk to him. Also threatening to beat her ass when she told him that it was not the best thing to threaten a coworker. Bonus: we're about to fire 2 different people right now. He was hired on specifically to work weekends as it's football season. He worked one weekend and said it was too busy and he's not working weekends anymore. He's gonna get a nice surprise when he comes into work tomorrow. Saturday is going to be a big day for us. One of our drivers thinks our new GM is an idiot and told her he has court Saturday and Sunday. I'll let that sink in. There's probably more, but that's all I can remember. Probably too late to the thread. But I have a story where I had to fire a staff member on the Sunday before I started work. Year was 2006. When I first moved to London, UK from New Zealand, I got a job managing a taxi call center. I knew nothing about taxis. My previous experience was in managing retail and then banking call centers. Anyway, some investor had bought up a bunch of mini cab companies and consolidated them into one professional/office environment. So I got the job and was due to start on the Monday. I got a call from the founder who asked me if I could urgently drop into the office to sort something out. He was at some airport about to board a flight to London back from Thailand. He didn't give me any details, but I agreed to see what I could do to help. I arrive and there is about 15 to 20 Eastern European drivers outside hanging around outside the office. They were obviously angry/upset about something, but they didn't know me, so I walked past and swiped my access card and went into the building. There was about 10 call center staff inside, some of who I had met as part of my interview process, so at least I was recognized so they could answer my questions. Turns out that the drivers were upset that the dispatchers were giving all the more lucrative airport jobs to their friends/family/etc. I thought that's impossible because I was told that the system was automated and delivered the job to the nearest taxi. Basically, the system would automatically send a job to the driver's PDA. The driver would then accept the job, then drive to the pickup location to pick up the customer. The dispatcher was only required when something out of the ordinary happened. I doubt the system wouldn't allocate a job as well as a human because it would simply allocate a job based on distance, as the crow flies, rather than a more practical closest car by driving distance. I logged into the dispatch system and used the user guide, which was in badly translated English. The system they were using was Russian-built. And I finally found a report of jobs that were allocated. There was a column on the report indicating which car number the job was allocated to. There was another column indicated the job was manually changed from, say, car 42 to car 89. About 30% of the jobs that day had been manually changed. I wasn't 100% sure if this was suspicious or not because, well, I knew nothing about the taxi industry. I needed more data. I was able to manually look up the car numbers and find the names of the drivers. I spent about an hour manually compiling a list that basically had cab numbers and driver names, and it basically looked like drop-off location, job allocated to, manual change to, Gatwick Airport, 23 Nowak, 99 Khan, Heathrow, 56 Kowalski, 11 Ahmed, Heathrow, 78 Wisniewski, 45 Hussein, Gatwick Airport, 12 Wojcik, 32 Ali, Gatwick Airport, 1 Kowalczyk, 101 Akhtar. 99% of the airport jobs were clearly switched from names belonging to one ethnic group to another. Looks suspicious, I think. So I decide to confront one of the dispatchers. I sit down next to the dispatcher, who is about 30 years older than me, and probably been a taxi dispatcher longer than I had been alive and say, "Hey, so you know what's going on outside, right? I just want to hear what you thought about it." He immediately stands up, smashes his keyboard into the monitor. Bits of keyboard flew everywhere. The monitor didn't actually break. It was a massive old-school CRT monitor, and the keyboard was flimsy plastic. And he walked out and was promptly chased down the street about 20 meters and cornered by the drivers waiting outside. It was very dramatic, but amazingly no punches were thrown. The dispatcher was dragged back inside by the drivers who managed to get into the office because one of them must have held the door from closing as the dispatcher made a run for it. And they demanded that I fire him on the spot, or they would all quit. And faced with about 15 to 20 angry dudes with an old dispatcher in a headlock in the middle of a call center, I fired the dispatcher. TLDR, the story of how I spent a Sunday in London learning how to be a taxi dispatcher. I worked my way up the ranks at one job. We did custom enterprise apps for the health and safety and insurance industries, so we had a few projects at a time. We had one project with one specific developer that was way over budget and well past any realistic delivery date, but the client was naive, the PM was shady, the CTO was senile, and this was at a time when any project in the insurance world took lifetimes to finish. This project should have taken 3 to 6 months and had ultimately taken 3 years by the time I was promoted from LSE to acting CTO, for reasons alluded to earlier. My first task was to get this project wrapped, so I called the developer and PM to a room and had finance and legal get me a copy of anything pertaining to this project, lay out what needs to be done to the team, and ask they get me any emails with the client that didn't include the previous CTO and a printed copy of the source as it currently sits, mostly to get the dev out of the room because he yammers inanely, constantly. Sitting in the room with the PM talking about the project while dev leaves to print and I run across an odd adjustment on the project, on the dev's timesheet, and again on the PM's timesheet. When the project was about 6 months over deadline, there was some hubbub about getting more time, and so we'd apparently bumped the team's pay by no small amount until they finished the project, hourly, and with the only oversight being a senile old man. Did the math, and after the adjustment, we would have broken even on the project had they finished it that quarter. That was 2 years ago. The company was bleeding money on this project to these two who were effectively writing themselves blank checks. Dev finally comes in with the printed code, and as I'm reviewing it, won't stop making excuses about things I haven't even found yet. The code is a hot mess of spaghetti C, not C++, which was the company standard at the time. A huge stack of paper, but from what I could tell, very little actual code. Plenty of partial HTML strings and hashtag defines. Not in any logical manner, mind you. Just entire pages of HTML sliced up about every 2K characters because of the limitation on hashtag defined string lengths. Some of which were valid enough if the application was even supposed to output HTML, but it wasn't. More half of them were the contents of tutorials or reference pages he used while writing the app. He cited the contents of the sources in their entirety in the source code. The rest was the documentation for the application, all in hashtag define HTML str1, blah 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 format, chunked up every 2,000 characters or so. The actual code was barely a skeleton of what the application should be doing, and even that isn't enough to be a proof of concept. I laid out pretty clearly the state of the application was substantially subpar for the amount of time spent on it, and that we'd spend the rest of the day coming up with a timeline to get it done by the end of the quarter, about 2 months out by this time. I excused myself to get some materials, went by and talked to finance, legal, and HR. We concluded the state of the project could be taken as fraud in court, both from the client suing us and from us suing these two jackholes. HR boxed their stuff and cut their final checks as I worked out a timeline with them in the meeting room, while finance and legal came up with something to soothe over a naive, but beyond patient client should things go sour the next day. The head of HR came in and handed me 2 packets, so I ended off my meeting by pushing the packets in front of them, saying, "Or we could just hire a contractor for 1/10 the price. You two have milked the company for over 2 years and have it done by the end of the month. Here are your termination papers." HR has your things in the lobby. You're fired. Get out. Called the client with the packet legal gave me, paid them back more money than I want to remember, and gave them a firm date for the application to hit functional beta, as we called it. Rifled through my stack of contractors we'd worked with in the past and made some calls. Had a couple guys who worked well together lined up to come in the next day and finish the app in 6 weeks. Delivered on time, 2 years late. Legal was very torn about filing fraud charges against them. Thankfully, the rest of my time there was nowhere near as stressful, but unfortunately no less facepalm-inducing. Greener pastures prevailed, and I've thankfully mostly avoided having to be a manager since pedantic debates between the meaning of supervisor and manager aside. I work at a hotel as an HR manager, and I have had to fire people for a wide range of reasons. Most of the time, it is for the normal stuff like the person is unreliable or incompetent, or they have messed up the money. But this one guy, who I will refer to as Dennis from here on out, was a special case. Dennis lasted 3 days with the hotel before being fired for theft, sexual harassment, drug use, and assault. Our story begins with Dennis' first shift when our front office manager was explaining the cash handling policy to him. As soon as Dennis hears he will be responsible for money, he asks how much and is informed $500. He then immediately asks what our policy is if the front desk is robbed, which sets off some red flags. Our FOM decided not to entrust Dennis with a bank very quickly. Later on, one of our other desk agents come in to work the evening shift and Dennis decided that she was totally his type. He then proceeds to hit on her aggressively and ask her out, as well as trying to get her number. She tells him fuck off, and at the end of his shift he goes home. She tells me and the manager, and we decide to give him a warning the next day. Not satisfied with being an annoyance before, Dennis decided to step up his game on day 2. After getting lectured on sexual harassment and written up when he comes in for training, he starts asking some more questions. One of which was, where do I find the employee directory in case I need to contact someone with a question? He then proceeds to copy down every number with a female name attached to it and spam them with dick pics from his secondary phone with the message, trying to find a room and fuck? Nobody knew it was his phone at the time, so it went under the radar. The rest of his shift was fairly unremarkable. Day 3, Judgment Day. It begins fairly unremarkably, but then I go out back to have a cigarette with another manager. Lo and behold, we find Dennis out back smoking a joint. We ask him if he was actually smoking weed, and rather than deny it, he responds, "Totally? You dudes want to hit?" We then explain that he has violated company policy and to head inside so we can begin termination procedures. We go through the paperwork and tell him to grab all of his stuff and leave, and we would mail him his check. As he goes to grab his bag, he picks up the FOM's laptop from her desk and puts it in his bag. He then turns around to find me standing there, decks me in the face, and tries to run. Winds up crashing into our engineer who held him down until the cops came to pick him up. While they were going through his bag to make sure he hadn't stolen anything else, we found the phone he had been sending dick pics from, 2 ounces of weed, and a bunch of paraphernalia. And so ended Dennis' employment at our property. I work in construction as someone who runs my own contracting business. We do everything from big renovations to even redoing your asphalt slopped roof, depending on if I have the stomach for it. Roofing fucking sucks. I hired a laborer once to help me with the cleanup. Basically, his job was to take the old roof we ripped off and threw down, pick it all up and throw it in the bin I had put in the alley from a bin rental. Fucking simple task. I did it when I was like 15 years old during summer holidays. So I show up with my buddy who works with me. We're sitting in the truck in the morning, drinking coffee and listening to the radio. There was a Ken bum in the alley behind the house, and this guy is picking through everyone's trash for cans. I figure, big deal. I see Ken bums all the time. Well, we get out of the truck. This guy turns out to be my hire from Craigslist. Whatever. No teeth, didn't bring a lunch. He's bumming smokes off my buddy for the day. Hard worker, but doesn't know shit except manual labor. Not very well dressed. Not even work boots so he doesn't step on a nail and have it go right through his foot. So at the end of the day, we're buttoning up the roof, as in it's finished. I'm putting the finishing touches on it, as in caulking and etc. I nonchalantly ask the laborer to come up the ladder. His next task is to remove the remaining bundles of material, get the rest of the stuff, i.e., tools, radio, etc. off the roof. I continue finishing up my tasks on the far side of the roof. We hear this banging noise from the front of property. I get up and walk to the front of the house. This fucking idiot was throwing the material bundles down onto the owner's paving stone driveway, and he'd turfed my skill saw down too. I could tell from the roof it was bent, as in ruined. I lost my mind on this guy. Told him to get off the fucking roof. Followed him down and told him he was finished. I asked him what in his mind made him think firing 80-pound bundles of material onto a paving stone driveway was okay. He couldn't answer me. To anybody with common sense, get the stuff off the roof. Doesn't sound like throw it off the 2-story roof onto the driveway. $160 power tools included. Paid him cash for his time. Told him to hit the road. I'm sure he had it all blown within a couple hours on a nice rock to smoke. The paving stone driveway, thankfully, wasn't cracked. Asphalt shingles are made with tar though. There were black scuff marks on it. It took some finesse to clean up. As in, I got a jerry can of gas and had to use that to rub the marks out. I work in construction. The sheer volume of fucked up stories I have to tell is enough to fill a book I want to write someday when I am old enough to retire. This was just one off the top of my head. And this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to comment an anecdote or experience similar to the topic of the video. Leave your like, share if you like the video, and lastly, don't forget to activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Bye-bye.